we rehearsed this. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming out. Hi, Jake. Thanks for, we hadn't really rehearsed that. Well, thank you all for coming. It is homecoming weekend, and I have no idea what that means until today. When we were here at Kent, Rosa and her husband Ryan, and someone we work with, Laura, and Adam, who's on camera, they, I should say, made horror films. And I had the pleasure of being an extra in one of those films. I was coming down an escalator, and now you guys, we're here again, back in Kent, and now I'm the star of the show, okay? So just so you know, you can start from really humble beginnings, just an extra on an escalator, and then you can have someone put makeup on you. All right, let's get Jennifer to the stage. Well, hello there.
Thank you.
Now, you're really coming home, because you're in Texas right now.
Yes.
So, how's where you're staying? Where are you staying?
At an Airbnb in Kent.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, in someone's basement.
Okay.
And then I really remembered that Texas has no basements. So I kind of missed that like dark layer that's beneath the house.
Do you get tornadoes? I think that's why we have them. I don't know, why do we have basements in Ohio?
Because we can. For Airbnbs.
For Airbnbs.
Yeah.
Right.
Or I think because Ohio breeds some like dark psychological torment.
And you
need the physical space to relate to that.
Is this from your personal experience from being in Ohio?
I know.
How long did you live in Ohio?
From the time I was like 12 to 22.
Okay, so you've carried some of that darkness
I
with
went
you.
through my awkward teenage years in Ohio, so
Perfect.
I think everyone knows what that feels like.
Mm-hmm. Spent a lot of time in a
Yeah.
basement.
Yeah.
Or a closet.
Yeah.
You know, depending on who you are.
Danny, are you ready to be made up?
What do you mean by made up?
Are you ready for some makeup?
Well, I guess we can do that,
Yeah.
but where's the makeup? Sorry. Too many lines, right?
I know. I can't take you seriously.
You're like, I didn't do theater, you did.
Yeah, you're supposed to direct me. I'm in the art world, not the theater world.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so how was your time here at Kent in the art world?
I kind of fell into art. So I started off wanting to be a doctor, and then I took my first chemistry class here, and I failed. And then I started taking law classes, and I took criminal justice classes. And then after a while, that got too heavy, and I took a ceramics class, the class I needed to take as a requirement for my major, and it kind of changed my whole world.
Do you work primarily in terms of clay with porcelain?
I do, but I tell everyone, like my schooling here, I was trained traditionally in the craft material of clay. I think it wasn't until my senior year I touched porcelain, and I love that it was this clean white material that was malleable. And then when I was in grad school, grad school's great because I kept learning and I kept researching what porcelain meant. So I then realized it was like porcelain was discovered in China 2,000 years ago, and in some ways is a cultural connection to my heritage. Mm-hmm. And I found like metaphorically it spoke to the ideas I was thinking about.
So, and then in grad school, is that when you also started to include hair?
I guess I've always been interested in the idea of hair because as someone who's struggled with identity of being half or biracial, mixed, other, I found that my hair, depending on how I had it, people would easily place me or recognize me as something. So when my hair is super straight with bangs, that's kind of a China doll haircut, so everyone would know that as, recognize me as being Chinese. But when I had the shaved head, like no one knew what I was. I tend to dress kind of androgynously or masculine in my everyday life. Mm-hmm. People would call me like a bad bitch. And like part of me really loved that because I have like a voice of a 12-year-old. So I felt really tough for a little bit. Mm-hmm. That's when I started realizing like if I'm making work about identity, I should be living it. So one of the big things that like happened in my work like after grad school of like struggling of like trying to distance yourself from like the work you create in grad school. So I always had this idea for a performance piece to like pluck all my eyebrows off because I love language. I love the idea of how plucking in a context of a young child when you are taught that nursery rhyme of he loves me, he loves me not, how much of that kind of really stuck with me, and of how like I've always been, as a young girl, taught to have my beauty be defined by men and what they liked and what they wanted. So in the performance piece, I look into the camera, which is in some ways a mirror, and I say, he loves me not, as I pluck each hair off.
So a really iconic image of you. Is that really cool to hear?
Yeah.
In one of your, Jennifer, in one of your more iconic images, you're wearing ceramic eyebrows that are in the style of Delft pottery. Is that right?
Well, it's inspired by Jin de Jin, traditional Chinese blue and white patterns. And what I love of after going on a few trips to China and studying the birthplace of porcelain, how I really saw those traditional blue and white patterns have never changed, that people in China that work in these factories still work traditionally. They still use the same like flower patterns or ginger pot patterns, and those haven't changed for like 2,000 years. But what I saw was how blue and white has traveled all over the world. And so when I was in China, I saw this Dutch blue and white pattern of windmills on a Chinese porcelain vase, and how that Dutch pattern was going back to the Netherlands. So how Delft blue and white isn't even manufactured in its home country anymore. It's being outsourced to China. So I kind of see that happening with beauty standards all over the world, and how when I was in China, I went to a salon, and it was a salon just for eyebrow tattooing. And I had seen like all the Asian women in my family get their eyebrows tattooed on. When I walked into this tattoo shop, just like any tattoo shop where you find what kind of flash you want, they had tattoos based off of patterns. So if you wanted an eyebrow with a thick arch and a thin tail, it was a Sleeping Beauty eyebrow. If you wanted a really delicate one, it was Cinderella. If you wanted a thick one, it would be Jasmine. And I realized all these names were names of Disney princesses. And how then this like white Western culture, princess culture, traveled all the way to China in this really small town. And the global standards of beauty are from the West are traveling east, and the standards of beauty in blue and white porcelain was traveling east to west.
What's the inspiration for this makeup? There's a lot of blue pen.
I know. I was thinking of transforming you into a blue and white base. Your face.
Is that what happened?
I don't know, maybe. Makeup's really hard. I like actually the white dust on your blue shirt, and I think actually I love that you wore a blue shirt today.
You got it. I'm glad to have accommodated.
Yeah.
Are we ready to reveal this?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. All right. Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny. You look like you're like a gigolo too. What juggalo? What are those things? Sorry.
Someone did make me a juggalo.
I know.
Oh, what kind of? I'm like some kind of juggalo.
I actually like you're a porcelain juggalo.
Porcelain juggalo.
Yeah.
Or porcelain gigolo.
Let's hashtag that porcelain gigolo.
Okay. All right. So I'll be here if you want some selfies. Remember the hashtag. All right. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I know. I want to take a picture.
Okay.
And you have white powder
Oh,
all
I'm sorry. I
over
hope I didn't get it on you.
No.
Viens, petite fille.